listening to the Mind Manual Podcast, episode 55, Finding Hope After Despair. If you want a particular result in your life, but you're unable to get it, tune in to start training your brain and expanding your emotional intelligence to unlock the most powerful and underutilized performance tool that we have. It's the most important work you could do because it affects every area of your life. Today's guest is someone whose story has inspired millions of people to reach out, connect, and show a little more care one another. Graeme Cowan is the co-founder of Are You OK?, the movement that's changed the way we talk about mental health, encouraging all of us to start those simple but powerful conversations that can make such a big difference. Before Are You OK? Was even an idea, Graeme had built a successful corporate career. He worked in senior leadership and HR roles with companies like Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and KPMG, the kind of high-pressure environments that many of us can relate to. But behind the professional success, Graeme was fighting a very different battle. He went through a long and devastating episode of depression, lasted 5 years, something that turned his life upside down and forced him to completely rebuild from the ground up. What makes his story so remarkable is how he turned that pain into purpose. Coming out of that experience, Graeme made it his mission to help others who might be struggling and to remind us all how powerful a genuine check-in can be. Since then, he's written best-selling books like Back From the Brink, spoken to audiences all over the world, and become one of the most respected voices in mental health and well-being, especially when it comes to creating caring, connected workplaces. I hope you get something out of our chat together and stay to the end where I go through a therapeutical appraisal of the journey that he shares with us. So I guess just to provide a bit of context, we're looking to create an authentic and a bit of a therapeutic map as to how this journey sort of unfolded for you.
Yeah, I was working with Carney as a vice president, and I was specifically focusing on executive search. I co-led that business. And in 2000, the tech crash happened.
Yeah.
And we'd had a very, very busy practice. We'd had lots of phone calls coming in, very busy. And then it suddenly just sort of switched off, and that had gone. And I, with Sean, were leading that business, and we're trying to keep a positive front and trying to work out how we would address things. And I just really let my mental health go. I'd had previous episodes of depression, but this was by far the worst. It lasted altogether for about 5 years. And I lost my job, my marriage broke down, and I had to go and live with my parents up on the North Coast. And I was with them for about 3 years, and I really wasn't able to look after myself. I was just deeply depressed, 100% convinced that I would never recover again, and all hope was gone.
Yeah. And so you were a high-functioning executive prior to this.
Yeah, I was. And it just sort of compounded, and there was some real, I think, critical turning points. I remember being in the kitchen with my mother, feeling really sorry for myself, saying, why me, why me? And she hit me with one of those mother stares and said, I believe you'll use this experience to help other people. And of course, I thought that was crazy. I could never imagine that ever happening. But it did sow a seed. And my recovery wasn't any fast or linear progress. There's lots of ups and downs on the way.
Very messy, isn't it?
It was. And so I started to walk, initially for 15 minutes, built that up to an hour a day. I then began to reconnect with family and friends. I'd really isolated myself and felt ashamed that I hadn't been able to work it out and get out of there. And then probably a really important milestone was deciding to do my first book, Back From the Brink. And that was sharing stories of some well-known and everyday Australians who had been through depression and bounced back. And that gave me a real, I guess, sense of purpose. I really
Yeah.
went from being me focused to thinking about
Mm.
we and, really thinking about how I could help to
Yeah.
give hope to those people. And I did come to discover that those stories were really important. We had 12 different people and talked about, what worked for them,
Yeah.
what brought it on. And then we launched it with John Brogden, the opposition leader at the time, New South
Mm.
Wales opposition leader, and we launched at the Black Dog Institute.
Yeah, right.
And because I had some well-known people there was lots of media coverage. We were on SBS News that night,
Mm-hmm.
and I did lots and lots of interviews after that,
Mm.
radio, TV, press, that sort of thing. And
Mm.
in that process, I discovered something that I really wasn't aware of, and that was that when I did book signings or talkback radio, often the people that were on or were asking for my signature weren't the ones struggling. They were trying to support someone who's struggling.
Mm.
And that led to my second book, which was Back from the Brink 2, TOO, How Best to Help a Loved One Overcome Depression.
Mm.
And then through the books, I met Gavin Larkin, the founder of Are You OK? And
Mm.
just straight away, I just felt it was spot on, this concept of identifying people, reaching out, listening with empathy, encouraging action, and was just a real privilege to be involved
Mm.
on the board of that for 13 years and
Mm.
see it really grow in reach and impact.
Yeah, no, there's some wonderful things that have come out of that. But just to sort of backtrack a little bit, leading up to everything, and the loss and that came afterwards, in your mind, what did you lose? I mean, other than the financial, your marriage and financial, but I'm guessing it went deeper to some identity, purpose you mentioned, you discovered that again. What was the thing that was causing you the greatest suffering, do you think?
I think it was just losing hope. You
Was
know,
it? Okay,
yeah,
losing hope.
yeah.
And hope for what?
Oh, normal life.
Yeah, and what is that normal life? Because this is what I think society sets us up into sort of these expectations of what a normal life should look like. Well, how are you processing or perceiving a normal life and what it should look like?
Well, I came to believe that I wanted three outcomes from life.
Yeah.
And first of that was vitality. So that was
Yeah.
physical health and energy and well-being, exercise, nutrition, good rest, intimacy, which was emotional well-being, having
Yeah.
really caring and supportive relationships around me, both at work and in my home life. And often those overlapped.
Yeah.
And then the third element was prosperity, which is career well-being,
Yeah.
your contribution to the outside world.
Yeah.
And that's really what I focus on now. I talk
Yeah.
about those three elements and encouraging people to act like a VIP. And what
Mm.
that means is topping up each glass of well-being so that, you stay balanced.
Mm.
Because in the past, I'd been too focused on work at the
Yep.
expense of my relationships and my physical health. And so it's just a resolution to
Mm.
do that. And I now have what's called a VIP self-care scorecard. And there's
Yeah. Great.
5 questions under each of those three categories to help people identify what might be some of the mood vampires in their life and then to have an action plan each week. And
Mm.
I have a sheet that I fill out each Sunday, which has got these things on it. It's got, the
Oh,
vitality,
great.
the intimacy,
Yeah.
the prosperity.
Yeah.
And I plan the week with that,
Yeah.
knowing that I will start the week with Monday, knowing that I've got a good week lined up in terms
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
holistic health.
Were you focused in this way leading up to it? Did any of these concepts feature prominently in your life at that time?
Before the breakdown,
Yep.
do you mean, or after?
Yeah, no, before.
No, not before. Not
Yeah.
before. No.
So you were caught up in what? What were you caught up instead?
Well, I guess just the achievement syndrome, really
Yeah.
just sort of measuring myself and my self-worth based on my
Mm.
achievements.
Yeah.
And when those achievements disappeared with the tech crash, that really challenged my whole self-esteem and self-worth.
Yeah.
Stupidly, like I look back now and
Mm.
know that that was ridiculous, but just in that on that treadmill, that
Yeah.
was my perceptions of a good and healthy life.
Yeah. And who helped to change that perception? Because that's like a fundamental shift, isn't it, in how we perceive what success is for our life and ourself. And you had a very different one going leading up to. So, what helped you make that shift?
It wasn't any, blinding flash. It was more
Yeah.
like just working out what I wanted my life to be like, how I would have balanced well-being, not just focusing on one, but
Mm,
focusing on all those three areas.
mm,
And and also later on, I also decided that, and this came after I interviewed Mike Schneider, the CEO of Bunnings,
mm-hmm,
and he talked about measuring his life by his four H's.
mm,
And so that was humble, honest, helpful, and happy. They're the
yeah.
four H's.
Yeah.
So I really like that concept of being able to know each week whether you're on track for how you want it to be authentic. And so I went on a 12-hour walk with no distractions.
Mm,
I just thought, what would I want my life to be? How would I like to measure it? And
mm,
so I came up for me what was the five C's, which was caring, centered, curious, constructive, and chuckling like dad. And I really do try to focus on one of those each week
yeah.
to really make it happen. And I think it is in the turbulence of life, in the uncertainty in the workplace, the overwhelm in the workplace, we need to establish what we are and how we want to evaluate ourselves and our
Yeah.
lives.
And that's the theme I'm picking up here, that this fundamental, it's like a reclaiming of
Yeah.
your definition and of how you want to live your life and what's important to you, rather than being led by society and the expectations that are created by this. And so you mentioned the CEO of Bunnings, and he's reclaimed that for himself and declared
Mm,
it to be
mm,
humble, helpful, honest, and happy. That's what's
mm,
important to him. And it
mm.
sounds like that was instrumental for you in reclaiming and declaring what is important to you.
Yeah. And all these things didn't happen at first. Like the VIP, I actually wrote about that in my very first book, which went back to about 2003. But the five C's just happened really in the last couple of years.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. And then you're consciously practicing, you've created a system and you're now following that to keep you on track in aligning your life with what you've declared to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's not always perfect.
Yeah. Nothing
That's
ever
what
is.
happens. That's life.
No such thing in this life.
There's always challenges and
Always.
unexpected things. But I think
Absolutely.
just having a confidence that even if you get off track, you can get back on track. And I think part of good self-esteem and well-being is being your own therapist, which
Mm,
means you recognize the early warning signs of being off track. And for me, that's often early morning awakening, not being able to get back to sleep again. And
yeah,
so
you're right.
when that happens, I really do step back and say, well, let's reboot
Yeah.
and speak to my psychiatrist, but also speak to my wife and a couple of mates just to let them know that I'm a little off track and
Yeah, yeah.
offer some encouragement. But yeah, it really works.
And during that time, I'm guessing you were in therapy as well.
Yeah, I had psychologists.
Yeah.
I would say for me that that was a big thing.
Mm,
I know for some people it's really imperative,
mm-hmm.
to their thought patterns and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But for me, that wasn't a big part
Yeah.
of my coming out of rising like a phoenix from crashing.
So, and you think it's really just connecting back, not just with others. You mentioned family and friends, but by the sound of it, it sounds like the big one was connecting back to yourself and checking
Yeah.
in with your authentic definition of what it is that you truly want out of life and what's
Yeah.
important to you. And
Yeah.
I guess that's coming home. And I guess we lose our way. We lose our sense of self and we hand it over to the treadmill of life and to the expectations of society. And that's where it sounds like you have your weekly check-in to make sure you're aligning back to that your truth, the authentic part that
Yeah.
has, I guess, given you the message of the way forward. This is the way
Yeah.
forward. Would you say that has been instrumental in coming back to yourself, your authentic self?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I talk now about a great leader's mindset,
Yeah.
and that has three elements. It's the self-care, and that's what we've just talked about,
Yeah.
the vitality, intimacy, prosperity. The crew care, and that's caring about belonging, building a sense of belonging in a team.
Yeah.
Leading with psychological safety so that people feel safe and contribute their best, and growing together where we encourage each other to try new things and to evolve. And then the third component is red zone care, and that's being able to identify and support someone who could be struggling either at work or in your personal life as well. And there's plenty of people out there going through that, as I'm sure you've heard and experienced and read about.
But it's not so widely discussed out there in mainstream.
There's still a lot of stigma in the workplace in particular.
Yeah. And I guess that's what the work of Are You OK, and Black Dog Institute, and why we're here is having these open, honest, authentic conversations that hopefully give permission for others to just talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be part of our everyday organisation. You look at the inner workings of our internal world, it's huge. It's huge. We have up to 60,000 thoughts a day, and yet the deepest, darkest ones of those, we feel that we have to lock away and we can't talk to and share any of that. It's crazy. So, that's what this initiative is about, is just opening up to having them as normal conversations. And then that Are You OK can then lead into, it's not hidden behind a wall.
Yeah.
That's an opening to have those real, authentic conversations. They're happening for every one of us, whether we want to admit it or not. I was looking at the research, the data, and they say that up to 40% of people will have suicide ideation at some point in their life. That is huge.
Sure is.
Whether that be fleeting or whatever, it's real, it's there. If we were to just be able to, I think, openly share, instead of asking, how's the weather all the time? It's just, how are you really? And to have that listening ear for people to be, I'm sure they'll resonate with it on some level, because we're all human and we all face these challenges and struggles, and it's happening for all of us. So why not open it all up as a subject to even connect on?
Yeah.
And explore together.
And I think KOK has done a very good role in making it common. I think it really has become sort of part of the Australian
much more so. Yeah. The campaigns, the exposure. It's okay to now ask the question. I guess what we're doing here now is talking on the other side of that conversation, where we can openly share and just talk about it and just explore what it's like.
Yeah.
Because I guess, every journey is unique, but there's going to be threads, a lot of common threads there. And so for you, I know prosperity was one, and one of the initial triggers was financial prosperity. But does that definition of prosperity now really expand and open up?
Oh, yeah, very, very much so. It's career or community well-being. And I describe that as your contribution to the outside world. It doesn't necessarily include paid work, for example, people that volunteer or make a difference another way. I feel that's very much part of that. And it's a spirit of abundance and knowing that there's enough out there for all of us.
Yeah.
And just being comfortable doing what we do that makes a difference. And I love Maya Angelou, the American poet. She defines success as liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. And it's so simple, but it's also really, really personal, because everyone's answer to those three questions or definition of success of those three questions is different.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that community wellbeing one you mentioned, that is huge. There's so many clients that I see that have this innate yearning to fulfill this role of helping others, of being of service. And when they're not performing that in some way, they feel lost and they feel empty and incomplete. And it's like so many of them, and it's so lovely to see, but I think we all crave to connect and to make an impact and make a contribution. I think that's part of our makeup. So many don't know where to go with that or what to do with it. Can you speak to sort of how you found ways in doing that?
I just use the word career, but it could be community, for example, community wellbeing. I see that as being the same sort of thing.
Okay.
But what I think there is some important parts of that. And one of those is to have a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And being able to know and uncover and describe your purpose, I think, is really, really important.
Really important.
And I've found that there's often a good way to help people to get some insight in that. And that is to reflect on a career or community highlight they're really proud of. They're proud of, it's their judgment. They have to describe it. And then I often have people in pairs then interview each other. And so the purpose of the interview is to understand what this event was that you're very proud of, why it was that was particularly meaningful for you, who were you helping in the process of, this activity, and how were they benefiting from that activity? And so that just really evolved. And I had a situation where I was doing a workshop where there were financial planners, and one of them said that there have been these stories about rogue financial planners, and she felt embarrassed to say that, someone said, "What do you do at a party?" She felt embarrassed to say, "I'm a financial planner." So we went through that process with her and tried to really pick out the things that she loved about the role and the difference it made. But then at the end of it, she was able to describe her first draft of a purpose, which was, I help people be worry-free about money so they can live their ideal life. I help people be worry-free about money so they can live their ideal life. And she was proud to say that, proud to describe that. And so for her, that was very, very purposeful. Likewise, I describe the work I do as helping leaders and teams to be more caring and resilient so they can enjoy growing together. And, when you do that review at the end of the week, did you do enough of that? Did you feel that you're on track with that? And if not, reboot and course correct.
Yeah, that's lovely. I think everyone is grappling too with that sense of purpose. Leading up to this period for you, did you have a clear sense of your purpose, or were you just on the treadmill?
More on a treadmill, I think. I really was. I hadn't really thought enough about it.
Yeah. And I guess, some people make it to the top and then still feel empty, I guess because they haven't connected with that sense of purpose. What's it all for? Here I am. So what now?
Yeah.
Which can be very deflating when you're meant to be on top of it all or at the top. Yeah, it's a really important piece, I think, to this whole puzzle. You mentioned the lost hope, losing hope was the most painful part about the whole thing. And a lot of people get there, they do. And so what would be your message to them at that point? What did you need to hear at that time?
Yeah, well, that's why stories are so important and why I included stories and interviews in my book, because people relate to stories and people remember stories. And particularly with the first book, I got lots of emails, just people saying how they got a lot out of the book, but they often described the one person they really related to. And usually it was someone pretty close to them, in terms of how they saw their lives. So being able to share stories about going through tough times, but also bouncing back from that and what you learnt along the way and what you'd like to share and to teach people.
And I guess the loss of hope, one big thing that sort of speaks to me is that they must still be stuck clinging on to what it is that they lost, let's say. And so that's a cue that we're still holding on to the old paradigm, the old way of thinking. And we haven't yet discovered the whole new way of looking at the world and what's important. And they can't see a way back to getting all the things that they did because they probably worked so hard and spent so much time and invested everything to that point that they could think that they couldn't possibly go and do it all over again. There's not enough time. Or they feel so deflated and feel like a shell of themselves that they just don't have it within them to do it again. And so to me, that's signaling we're still holding on to what it was that we lost and everything that was meant to represent. And that's, I think, the cue with this lost hope business that, hey, we haven't opened up to exactly what it is that is really important to us here, or to design the life that if you were given the blank canvas, how would you and what would be important to you to really sit down and consciously create that, just like you did with your 5 C's and the Bunnings CEO did with his 4 H's, and you worked out your 3 things that you tick off every week. Now, that was all a very conscious creation.
Yeah, it didn't happen overnight, but it probably, I've been living that for probably about 15 years now, something like that.
Yeah.
It has endured for a long time.
Yeah. But do you think in that point where you had lost hope and that was the most painful part, can you see that was what you were holding on to, all the old stuff?
I don't think so. I think when you're stressed and burnt out, you think very black and white. And you also have this view that your world that you're experiencing is the only world.
Yeah.
And that is just so wrong. And you don't really realize that until you consciously step away and realize other options that are out there.
Yeah.
But when we're just on a little treadmill, and we think, the whole world's a treadmill.
Yeah, and that's it. That's all we've got.
Yep.
Yeah. Which is the old paradigm that we're living in, that this is the only way we can see it. It's very rigid black and white thinking, isn't it? The more we get stressed out, the less access we have to our higher logical reasoning brain. And you were stuck in a contracting mindset, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to see anything other than one way. For you, that reset in starting to open up to an expanding mindset and seeing all the possibilities in a way that you could create and design the life that you wanted, that's not an overnight step to take. Were there any sort of significant moments that helped to keep opening that up for you?
Yeah, it was making the decision to write my first book. And that was very much about, it was very purposeful. The purpose of it was to share stories, but also share hope about bouncing back. So that was a really key element of going from very me-focused to, thinking about others.
Yeah. And I guess that's a big thing too that you raise, me-focused. So when we can only see ourselves, and I know that's when I was in a dark place one time, it was very me-focused. I was very lucky. I got stuck in there for a long time, I would say 2 years, but I had some other protective factors. I still had young children and they kept pulling me out of that me-focused scenario. But for those that don't have those protective factors, that can't see beyond themselves, what are some of the things that they could, I guess it's friends, connecting, going out and contributing with communities, develop the sense of belonging, which is that one of those primal fundamental things we crave as humans is connection. We all crave connection. Would you say that is a huge part?
Yeah. The quality of your relationships is the quality of your life. All the research out there, the Harvard adult development study, the longest wellbeing study in the world, found that the quality and care in relationships is the best predictor of a long life, happy life, and affluent life.
Yeah.
And so making time for those people, that special group of people, what I call your green zone crew, is important. And that's part of the Sunday planning for me, working out who I'm catching up with this week.
Yeah, that's so good. It sounds to me like you are living your life more consciously.
Yeah, for sure.
It's very deliberate in what you set about to do and what's important, and you tick the boxes on all of those, which is wonderful. And just by design, the human brain has up to 60,000 thoughts a day, and only 5% of them we are conscious of. I think opening up to learning how to live more consciously and expanding that 5% beyond will potentially open up so much more for those to see that there is a whole other side of life that could open up and could be the way out of this no hopeless point that so many decide to go ahead and end their life at that point. But what they can't see is on the other side. And there is another side. It's just how do we cross over? I guess that's the big thing. Your new book coming up. You mentioned before that it's the big one for you. It's got everything in it. Can you give us a little prelude? It's not published yet, but soon to be.
Yes, it's going to be published by Wiley in April, but it's called Great Leaders Care. And the three-part element of that is about our self-care, which is building our personal resilience, crew care, which is building psychologically safe and resilient teams, and the red zone care, which is about how we go about identifying and supporting people that are struggling. And balancing all those three areas is a really important part. It can be very difficult time balancing self-care and caring for others, especially if you've got young kids and all that sort of thing. But it is just very, very critical. I often survey my audiences when I speak about what's been most challenging about the last 3 months. And pretty much top every time is uncertainty, just not knowing exactly what's going to be happening. And humans crave certainty.
Oh, they do. Yeah.
And it's often not possible.
Yeah, not possible. Yeah.
But I think leaders can play a really important role with that as well. I've worked with some great leaders that, just do things like having a Q&A every 2 weeks. Everything's on the table. And there's some things that they know and they can share. There's some things that they know and they can't share at this stage. And there's some things they don't know. But even making those three categories, it just brings down stress and burnout by doing that. That's such a simple thing, but it just really does it. And I've been able to, over the years, work with some leaders who've done some really great work around that, about, just tapping into what are the things that are inhibiting performance, the things that are inhibiting collaboration and working better together. And a lot of it does center around psychological safety and, making it safe for people to be their authentic selves, making it safe for people to challenge ideas they don't agree with, making it safe to be able to suggest ideas that they think are good, sort of thing. And there's no one person in the workplace or a team that has all the answers. And so being able to tap into the collective intelligence of the group is a really important foundation of success. It really is.
Yeah. And with the businesses you've worked with in trying to set up these systems for that, and particularly with your red zone care and the leaders of those organisations that are checking in fortnightly or whatever on all of this, is that something they go and share with the whole team? To what degree are you opening this up to at the workplace?
It's probably best to talk through an example. And I worked with a guy called Dave Banks. He was with NAB and a very good leader. He had like an internal consulting group within NAB, basically around helping to reduce the cost of doing business. And they were doing really well. As I said, he's a really good leader. And they were rated, I think, 84% engaged and 78% was considered high performance. So they're doing really well. But Dave just sort of sensed that things were going a bit off track. People were getting a bit stressed and a bit me focused and that sort of stuff. And so he organised for me to speak to the group, but also to survey the group to find out what their moods were out of 10, how they felt that they were collaborating with others and working with others. And it came out again pretty well that the average mood for the whole group was 7.6. But there were 7 that were 5 or below. That's very much the red zone. And so he had me present a little bit about my story and coming back from a really tough time. And then we had another guy there, part of the team, who 10 years before had a really bad setback and was very, very unwell. Gradually turned his life around and became the triathlon, the super triathlons, the Hawaiian triathlons. And when he shared his story, it suddenly made it safe for everyone else to share theirs. And so people were complaining about not being able to sleep properly, not being able to switch off, not being able to turn off. And so what happened is that Dave's leaders had each about 10 people each to talk through what they could do, what would make a difference. They got all these ideas, and then the following week, the leadership team got together, reviewed it all, and chose 3 things. And one of those things was to have this Q&A session, and that made a big, big difference.
And that was with the open forum, with the wider team?
Yeah, everyone. The other thing was having knock-off time on Friday at 3:00 so people could start the weekend with some me time, do some nice stuff on the me time. And the third thing was to have more walking meetings, with anything under 4 people in a team, go on walking meetings instead.
I like it.
Yeah, very simple, low-cost things. And then redid the assessment 90 days later, and it just had changed dramatically. Just little things and biting suggestions from people and then trying to then synthesize and work out what would work better. So, I think those sort of real-time assessments are very, very important. And there's now lots of various monitoring tools to help assess people each day, help assess the culture each day. I think they're really good because you can't wait for a once-a-year engagement survey, then get the results back, 3 months later, and then by then everything's changed. There's been a restructure and all that sort of stuff. So really having a finger on the pulse now is a really important component.
Yeah, I guess a lot of what you're doing there, that work, is humanizing everything. Going out for a walk in nature and having those conversations alongside of doing normal activities other than in the 4 walls, and the crew care, showing that they're human, that they care, that there's another element than just business. Is there anything more that you would like to impart, something we haven't spoken about yet that you would like to share or have people consider?
Well, I talked about purpose, and I think that's really important for people to explore that and create their first draft of their purpose, but also understanding and using and developing their strengths. I'm a real fan of the Gallup Strengths Clifton Finder, where they've got 34 strengths, and you get to find out what your top 5 are.
Yep.
And also, the other positive psychology version, the VIA, they use an action assessment as well.
Yeah.
Because purpose is your direction. The strengths are your tools, so you can be most effective in that direction. And the third component I believe in is about gratitude, just being really grateful for what we have. We are unbelievably privileged in this country. Anyone who's traveled the world or been to third world countries, you just know that it's very, very, very rare.
Such a better way to feel is when we're feeling grateful and gratitude.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful feeling space to be in.
Yeah.
And there's always something we can find to be grateful for.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's how I explain it to people. I mean, wouldn't you rather be feeling grateful than bitter or resentful? And I guess that is intentionally, again, consciously choosing which way you want to feel, which way you want to start orientating your life. We get stuck in that limiting, contracted mindset where we can only see it one way, which is our way.
Yeah.
and think that's the whole of it. That's all that's available to us. That's the trap, I think. Well, it's so good that you've come through it the other side and done some amazing work. Wonderful contribution. And looking forward to your new book coming out. What was the title again?
Great Leaders Care, and it's coming out in April 2026.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Graeme. It's been lovely chatting with you. And continue on with the great work.
My pleasure. Thanks so much. It was great having a chat with you.
Thanks, Graeme. So some key insights that I took away from Graeme's story was just how holding on keeps us stuck. When life changes without our consent, the mind often responds by gripping tighter to what was. We cling to an idea, a role, possession, status, or identity because it once organized our world and told us who we were. Holding on feels like safety. Yet, paradoxically, that grip can become the very structure that keeps us stuck. So let's explore for a bit how a contracting mindset forms, why it erodes hope, and what helps us to loosen the grip so possibility can return. Some of the factors in how the contracting mindset forms includes the concept of when threat narrows attention. Under stress and loss, the brain's threat system gets louder. Attention collapses around danger signals and away from nuance. What was once one of the many options becomes the only viable way to live. This attentional tunnel makes sense biologically. It conserves energy and readies us for action. But it distorts reality by filtering out evidence that growth is possible. The second is cognitive attachment. We don't just have thoughts, we fuse with them. A belief like success equals my job title, or if I don't live here, I won't be happy, stops being a map and becomes the territory. The mind treats it as a fact. This is stabilizing when life matches the belief, but it's destabilizing when it doesn't. And the greater the attachment to these cognitive constructs, the more intense the shock when life moves on. The third is identity foreclosure. When our identity forms around a single story, the achiever, provider, rescuer, elite performer, we foreclose other identities before they've even had a chance to develop. Losing the role then feels like losing the self. In this space, hope drains away. And not because the future is empty, but because the self we used to be can't imagine inhabiting it. Fourth are social mirrors and status. We are tribal creatures. Recognition, belonging, and status are powerful regulators of self-worth. If our community has reflected back a very narrow picture of success, deviating from that picture can feel like social death. The fear isn't only about money or comfort, it's about being seen differently. The fifth, sunk cost and the myth of the one right life. Years of effort, degrees, mortgages, and networks create psychological investment. The mind resists acknowledging change because it implies those investments won't pay off the way we planned. And this is where the myth of the one right life takes hold. There is only one good path, and it's the one we were on. Together, these forces produce a contracting mindset that consists of all or nothing thinking, rigid rules, rising shame, and isolation. And it's a short hop there to hopelessness. So let's look at why holding on erodes help. Hope is not blind optimism. It's made of 3 strands: a meaningful direction, pathways towards it, and the felt sense that we can take those steps. Attachment to what was collapses each strand. Direction narrows to get back what I lost, even when that world no longer exists. Pathways appear singular in that we must rebuild exactly the same structure or nothing. When reconstruction isn't possible, the mind declares that there are no paths. And then agency shrinks because attempts to force the old map to fit the new terrain keeps failing, convincing us that we're powerless. In short, we don't lose hope because there is no future. We lose hope because our frame denies a future that differs from our past. And then there is the necessary grief. Part of loosening the grip is naming that we are grieving, not only people or places, but also expectations and versions of ourselves. When grief is invalidated, like we might hear and internalize the voice of just move on, it calcifies into stuckness. When grief is honored, it metabolizes. We can say, that chapter was precious, it shaped me, and it's over. Grief converts clinging into continuity, allowing us to carry forward the essence, the values, the skills, the loves, without recreating the exact form. So a way of opening back up is to look at the following 5 evidence-informed shifts. 1, from fusion to a wider perspective. When we practice diffusion, we start noticing thoughts as mental events, not commands. For example, try saying, I'm having the thought, the only good life is, fill in the blank. A second layer to that would be, I notice I'm buying into that thought right now. This gentle distancing weakens the trance of only one way. 2, from control to contact with the present. When we over-control, when we try to fix the past, guarantee outcomes, we disconnect from the present, which is the only way we can influence. Try anchoring in sensory experience. Notice and feel your feet on the floor, your breath expanding your ribs, feeling of air on the skin. This contact connects us to the reality as it is, not as it was. And from here, small things start to become visible. 3 is looking at the role to the values that mean something to us. Because the inevitability is that roles end, but values travel. Begin to identify the qualities you most want to express. For example, caring, centered, curious, constructive, playful. Ask, how might these show up in any context? Values re-expand possibility because they can be enacted wherever you are and wherever you go, at home, at work, in a community, in a new city, even in illness. And then the 4th is when we go from certainty to experiments. Instead of deciding the next decade, run 2-week experiments. For example, if I wasn't clinging to the old role, I'd volunteer Thursday nights. I'll try it twice. Experiments sidestep perfectionism. They generate real data and often restore a sense of agency much faster than reflection alone. The 5th is going from solitary striving to co-regulation. Isolation amplifies rigid thinking. Share your stuck story with one or two safe people and ask them to reflect back other stories that they might see in you. Borrow their wider view while yours is so narrow. This is not dependency. It's good nervous system hygiene. And some practices to help loosen the grip. The first one is to draw 3 columns. In the first column, title that Old Maps and list what you're clinging to, whether that be a title, home, an income level, a routine, an identity. And ask yourself, what did each of these give you? Was it stability, recognition, learning, camaraderie? In the second column, we title that with living essence. We want to translate that list in the first column into an underlying value or need. For example, it might be growth, contribution, creativity, belonging, beauty, adventure. And then in the third column, we want to title that new forms. And we want to brainstorm at least 3 fresh ways, small or bold, to meet those values now. Keep it concrete and near term. Second little exercise is going for a 10% loosening. So we want to pick one rigid rule you might have. Example, I must always be productive. And ask, what would a 10% loosening look like for 1 week? For example, it might be 1 unstructured hour after dinner. And evaluate how your mood and energy shifts. Third little exercise to do with widening our moves is when you notice black and white thinking creeping in, do 1 widening move. So step outside, for example, for some stargazing and explore a whole other dimension for a while. Or text a friend a sincere appreciation. Read 1 story of someone who rebuilt differently. Take a 10-minute brisk walk to help create some space around the concept that it's all just black and white. And each move you make signals to the nervous system that there are options. The fourth exercise is to rewrite a kinder narrative. Rewrite that story in first person, in the present tense, emphasizing continuity. For example, I am someone who brings, fill in the blank, to whatever room I'm in. That hasn't ended. I'm learning where I'm most needed next. And read it out loud each morning for a week. And what this means for hope is that reopening, reauthoring, restoring isn't about lowering standards or pretending losses don't matter. It's about relocating hope from a specific reconstruction to a renewed relationship with possibility. When we stop demanding that the future must look like the past, alternative pathways start to appear. New collaborations, scaled back roles that honour health, seasonal work, study, community, leadership, art, caregiving, entrepreneurship, or quiet service. And often the life that emerges is not smaller, it's truer. And here are some gentle guardrails when you feel that contraction, that constriction. First is name it. My mind is contracting around 1 right way. Soften the body. Unclench your jaws, your shoulders, and exhale twice as long as you inhale. So we want to activate that autonomic nervous system by exhaling much longer, much harder than our inhaling, to signal back to our nervous system Now we are now at rest. We are not hypervigilant. We are resting. The next is to ask two widening questions. What else could be true? And what is one small action that I could take in the next hour that aligns with my values? Delay big decisions. Institute a 48-hour pause on irreversible choices during those red zone days and consult your green zone crew, as Graeme would put it. Return back to basics, your sleep window, movement, nourishment, sunlight, connection. Basics aren't boring, they're bandwidth for our nervous system. So before we finish here, I want to leave you with this. You are not failing because you can't rebuild what was. You are being invited to carry forward what was alive in that chapter and discover some different forms that are worthy of who you are now. Letting go is not abandonment. It is stewardship. It protects the essence of your values so they can find new, fresh places for you to express and experience them in a different light. When the mind insists there is only one good life, you can thank it for trying to keep you safe and then choose to widen your view. And in the space that opens, hope returns, first as a whisper and then as a path you can walk. For those of you who may want to continue on with this work, I have prepared a worksheet with some key takeaways, some tools, some practical tips that you can take with you. Just go over to themindmanual.com/episode 55 to download it and begin on that journey. Thanks for listening, guys. Hope you got something out of that. Pass it on, forward it on to someone that you know might be struggling, not seeing it any other way, who is struggling with depression. And we'll see you soon. Take care.